Welcome back. We were discussing how to add CSS into your document. And we already discovered how this can be done by using inline CSS and also by adding CSS block inside your HTML's head tag. Now we'll also look at how to add CSS from an external file. An internal CSS is what we do using this simple tag that is style, which ends with style, and you declare your CSS styles inside it. Similarly, inline styles are what you provide as an attribute called style. We can now also apply styles from an external document. A simple way of doing this is basically having your mystyle.html. Let's say we have this one document, and that's an HTML document, and we also created another file which ends with a .css format. Okay, so .css file is nothing but a simple text file. The only difference is that the extension described to it is .css, so your browser can understand that this is a style document. Now, if you look at the style document which I created, selector.css, I declared my styles and they look pretty much similar to your JSON objects in JavaScript if you have heard of it. If you're not, it's okay, not an issue. The simple form is you have to define a selector and then start the style definition with a curly braces. The curly braces, as in some of you call it the curly brackets. The curly brackets start and end defines the scope of this particular style definition, inside of which you have to just provide key and value pairs. The key would be, for example, the background color and then the value set to it. Exactly the same way we did in the inline styling statements. And every key value pair has to be separated with semicolon. Now, for the ease of typing and reading, we have separated also with a separate line. So after every semicolon, I've added a next line character, that is, I tapped enter on my keyboard. We'll get into understanding what are these style selectors. Now, style selectors are basically the way to tell your browser what style has to be applied to which element on the basis of certain criteria. This criteria could be some sort of a marking or an ID set to your element, or it could be some sort of a style which has been defined to it in an external document, or it could be simply by the name of its tag. So there are different types of CSS selector. Selector as in what selects a particular element or a set of elements. So the first one that people know about is the element selector. Element selector is nothing but to give the name of the tag itself, for example, the paragraph tag, and then you define a style. What this will do is it will set this style to every paragraph that is created on the document. Next is ID selector. ID selector is nothing but an attribute given to your element in your HTML element, be it button or div or paragraph, anything. You can set an attribute known as ID. Just like you use the style attribute and the width and height attribute for your image, you can also create an ID attribute on any element. ID equals to whatever is going to be your ID. Now that ID selector is basically defined using a hash. You have to prefix it with a hash so that your CSS document processor understands that this is an ID. Similarly, you have class. Now in case of an ID, the ID can exist for multiple elements, but your CSS selector is going to apply for those elements only. You also have class. In case of class, these are basically namespaces which can be created with a prefix of a dot. So a dot as a prefix, as you can see, dot center is a class created. You just need to apply an attribute called class to your element. When you apply the attribute class to an element, you need to provide a value that is the name of class that you want to apply to it. So whatever class has been applied over here, whatever class styling has been defined will be applied to that element automatically. Similarly, again, we have attribute selector. So let's say you don't want to use your styles by ID or CSS class names, but you want to also apply some styling based on the attributes given to a document. Say, for example, selected or not selected or disabled is also one of the attributes. And you can provide that attributes as you want as your document selector. Then you have universal selector, which is nothing but a star mark. This can be used basically to define style for all the elements altogether. Now let's take a look at the style element, how this works. Now, as I said, we created two documents. First is an HTML document inside of which I have first of all attached my CSS. That is, I have provided a link reference to my external CSS document. The external CSS document, which is selectors.css, is attached to this HTML by using the link tag. In the link tag, you need to have two attributes. First is the rel attribute, which is basically giving a relationship of it, that is style sheet. Next is the href, that is the exact file location. Now, since both these files are under the same folder, I don't need to give any directory name or anything. I can directly type the file's name, selectors.css, which automatically includes this document inside my HTML. So, for example, if I misplace its name or provide a bad link, let's say I give some sort of a folder before it, you see the style in my document has gone because it's not able to find my CSS document. So, you have to be careful with providing the exact name and exact location of this file. Now, let's take a look of all these styles and how they are applied. If you observe properly, the HTML document itself has no CSS defined on it. This means all my CSS has been defined on this external document. In the external document, I have created the different types of selectors to take a look how they work. The very first one is the element selector, and I've applied it to the H2 type. I've given it a background of dark blue, color of your green yellow, and a padding of 5 pixels, which is very much visible to you. That is dark blue in the background, that is the H2 element. And it also takes up the entire width of the space available to it. That is why it's very much prominent. That is the element. So if I try to create another element, it automatically takes up the same style. Let's say at the end of the document, I add another H2 element. This is ending header. Automatically, the exact same style has been applied to it. This is how CSS selectors work. Let's take a look at other selectors. Then you also have the selector called mylist1, okay, which has a hashtag right before it. So this means it's an ID selector. The hash denotes that this is an ID. So an ID selector can be applied to anything which has an ID. Now in our UL, which is an unordered list element, I applied the ID mylist1. And the selector here has the definition of the style that is to be applied, that is providing it a background color, dark olive. To make this more evident, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also apply some padding. As you can see, some padding has been applied to it. That doesn't look that great, so I'm going to remove it again. Okay. Similarly, I can apply this ID to other documents. Let's other items. Let's say I have this B element at the end, which is for bold text, and I apply the ID, and I also provide the same ID to it. It has got two properties applied to it. One, by default, it had a red color, and second is a background color which I gave to it. So you can apply these styles to multiple elements based on the selector that you have, whether it's an ID selector, style selector for a class, or the element selector itself. Similarly, you have the class selector. Class selector has a prefix of a dot when you define it. However, when you are applying it, you don't apply the dot with it. You just provide the name inside of the class attribute. Now, in my unordered list, I've created list items, and each one of them has a class attribute which says item. Now, item is a class which I created with a dot prefix over here. Please take care. If you provide the dot over here, it's not going to be able to find that style. And you see, the first element has gotten rid of its style. So it lost its style attribute the moment I applied the dot because it couldn't find that particular class. So you need to be careful while naming. You must be also wondering why is it that we have an ID tag selector and also a class tag selector both do the same job. And yes, there is an answer to it. You can apply multiple classes in an attribute, whereas you can only apply one ID to an element. Elements don't allow you to have multiple IDs. Your document might not break apart, but your browser will not allow you to select multiple IDs on the same element. But you can apply multiple classes on it. Let's say I declare one more class over here. Let's call it test. And in this case, I am going to turn the background color to it as black. So not background, yeah, background color of it into tomato, or let's say make it dark blue. Now if you see, the test can be applied to anyone. Let's take the last item, the mid item, which is class selector, and inside the class attribute I'm going to add a space and write the name of the second class which I created. And you can see this one appears to as if it has been selected, or you are hovering over it, gives you that sort of a transition effect. But we haven't applied it to any hover style yet, but this is how it looks. So item and test are two classes, and it allows us to have multiple classes on the same element. That is the purpose of having a class selector. Similarly, we have attribute selector, and attribute selectors can also be multiple because you can have multiple attributes to an item. Now, if you see in the unordered list itself, before listing all my items, I have listed a bold text which says types of CSS selectors. And to it, I have applied this attribute role equals to title. Your attribute could be absolutely anything, it just has to be the name of an attribute equals to some value provided in double quotes or single quotes. And in my attribute selector, all I have to do is I have to provide box brackets, and inside the box bracket I have to provide the exact same attribute as I have defined in my elements, and the style applied to it will be automatically implemented. Finally, the universal selector. In this case, I have applied the color red to star, that is a wildcard character, which means any element that does not have some sort of a style definition, no class, no ID, or no inline styling, will automatically get this red color to it. And that has already happened for the second last element over here, that is B. Okay, it has no ID, no class, no attribute that is giving any style to it. Okay, even our H2 has its own element style, but B doesn't. That's why it is getting this color red, that is from the universal selector. I hope this has given you some sort of an understanding how CSS selectors and styles are applied. We will definitely look into understanding different styles, how they work in the next moving on chapters. But please feel free to revisit this chapter if you ever feel confused about selectors. Selectors are an important element about CSS, and they are very useful to play with while creating your own custom style sheets. Thank you.